oh, Germany's very nice. Munich's very nice. So I was like, okay, like, why not? I was 21, didn't know a single soul here, but like had like all this drive and like excitement and curiosity that I was like, let's go. Like, why not? What has kept me here? The quality of life. Honestly, I shuddered like at the thought of like having to go back to the US and like having 10 days of vacation a year.
Were there like culture shocks for you when you first moved to Germany?
I was yelled at like my first week for crossing an empty street, but the pedestrian like light was red. And like I'm suddenly like being yelled at in German by this little old man. And I was just like, I'm so confused. 8.5 years later, I can solidly say that the people here like aren't super warm and open and friendly.
Does it feel isolating then to be living in that culture full time in Germany, or have you gotten used to it?
That's a great question.
So let's take it back to the beginning, if you don't mind, and hear kind of your origin story. Where are you from? Where were you raised?
My name is Paulina de los Santos, and I am from Texas. I grew up in Houston, and then when I was 10, I moved to South Texas near the Mexican border, where my family's originally from. I grew up with a grandma who was from Mexico, and I'm ethnically then Mexican, hence the name. People here in Germany think that I'm maybe Spanish. But yeah, I'm from Texas and I live in Germany now.
So did you, when you were growing up, did you go to Mexico frequently as well, living so close to the border, or were you mostly just in the US?
That's a great question. So we would go, I think, like when it was safer. It depends what year it was. Like in 2008, 2010, like it wasn't as safe, like with a lot of like gang violence near the border, especially near the border. But in between, like in the safe patches, like we would go cross the border and like get some nice avocados, like nice produce and things like that, since I grew up 10 minutes from there. What else would we get? People would get antibiotics off like the streets at the pharmacy right there. Other medicines. Medical tourism was really, really big, like in the border where I was by, but it wasn't necessarily like for vacation or anything, just kind of like little day trips.
It's like practical reasons
that
you went there. And now, do people get medicine from Mexico because you don't need a prescription for it? Is that the advantage?
At the time, yes. I don't know what it's like today, but in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, like, yeah, I mean, people would go get, it's called like a Z-Pack, and like they just like cross the border, go get some antibiotics. And it's such an issue because like, I mean, they say like the one threat to modern medicine is going to be like antibiotic resistance. And now like living in Germany and knowing like how antibiotics they are here, like they only want to use that like when it's absolutely needed. Like we kind of just like grab it like candy where I'm from.
Right.
But also like other tourism there, like dental tourism is really, really huge where I'm from. Like people get braces or like cavities filled. I did that as well. Because the healthcare system in the US like is just very complicated, and it's very expensive. Very, very expensive to get very simple dental work in the US.
Yeah, I think like Canada is known as being a country with free healthcare, right? And so we're often compared with the US and how much better it is here in terms of the cost of getting medical work done. But dental is not free for us. So we also have to pay a lot for cavities or root canals or whatever it might be. And so I've heard of people here in Canada flying to Mexico to get dental work as well. So not even just crossing the border if you're 10 minutes away, but actually like it's even cheaper to fly internationally.
Go stay a few days. Like crazy, like especially for like bigger procedures, I guess, then monetarily it makes perfect sense. And growing up, actually, since knowing that you're from Canada, there's a funny quote that people would say in Texas, and people would always like joke and say like, "Oh, it's just like marry Canadian, like go marry like marry Canadian, like for that healthcare." Because I think like everyone has known where I'm from in the U.S. like that, like our system is like not serving us the best.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to grow up on like in a border town as well, because it feels like it would be like the most culturally diverse place. Like you'd have kind of like a duality of cultures. Did it feel like that growing up, that you were growing up between two cultures or with two cultures?
Absolutely. So Well, growing up in Houston, actually, I was like one of the only like Mexican American kids like there, like in my elementary school. Maybe I don't even say Mexican American because I don't have the nationality. Person with Mexican roots or heritage, and so that was very different. Like Houston was very, very, very diverse. Like people from all different ethnic backgrounds. And then when I was 10, I moved to my mom's hometown region where my grandma lived. Moved in with my grandma, who's from Mexico, and I was shocked because it's almost like it's just not diverse at all. It's like 99% of my high school was Mexican Americans or like Latinos. And so that was a shock when I first came down there to South Texas, and I was like, oh, like I'm just like everyone else here. And then I quickly embraced my people, of course. One thing for sure is like what I'll say is that I didn't appreciate it as much until I left. Like the rich culture of growing up in a border town. And one funny thing is that I think I really thought that a lot of things that I was doing, like whether it's like music wise or culture, like food, was like Mexican. And I have friends from Mexico now here in Germany, and they're like, girl, no, like that's Tex-Mex. Like that's
right.
That's fusion. That is, we don't claim that. They're like, that's cute, that's nice, but like that's very Tex-Mex of you guys, which is sweet in its own thing.
Yeah, it's like a very different culture, isn't it? The Tex-Mex versus like the Mexican culture.
Yeah.
I remember like a very eye-opening experience talking to somebody from Mexico about like something super kind of stereotypical like burritos or tacos. And I was like, I love burritos, like your classic lettuce. And they're like, nope, we don't put lettuce. And I'm like, ground beef. They're like, nope. And I was like, sour cream. They're like, no.
Cheddar cheese.
Yeah, cheddar cheese. I'm like, and they're like, no. And I'm like, what do you guys put in burritos? Because for me, that's what a burrito is. But of course, that's like more Tex-Mex flavor,
yes,
I think. Yeah.
Exactly. And like burritos aren't even like traditionally Mex. It's very Tex-Mex.
Ah, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of went from like being the minority in Houston to being the majority in the smaller town.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I feel like, I mean, I don't know if this is accurate or not because I'm not from the US, but when I'm there, it does feel like cities are a little bit more divided based on culture or ethnicity. Like there's like very much like this is, the neighborhood where people from Cuba live, and this is where the Mexicans live, and this is where these people live, and in Canada, I feel like we're also a very, very diverse country, but it does feel like it's a little bit more melded. Like people live in the same neighborhood with each other. Now it would probably depend on the city a little bit. I would guess that in Canada, neighborhoods are more divided by economic class than they would be race. Yeah. And maybe those two things are more related in the US. I don't know, but
I was just going to say, I think that's actually probably why that is like goes down to socioeconomic status, and that oftentimes those are correlated with your like ethnic background. Unfortunately, I don't think that should be the way that it is, but maybe that could be. And when I think about like districts within Texas, like for schools, it's very common like that. Yeah, the predominantly white American neighborhoods have like the most resources and like the most funding for the public schools through donors, for example, and then they have additional courses that are offered, additional sports, versus lower income areas like the one that I grew up in, South Texas. When it comes to like public school resources, like there isn't much in comparison to other districts.
And I have heard that critique in Canada as well, that like you're assigned a public school based on the neighborhood that you live in. And if you live in a more affluent neighborhood, it's mostly just going to be like, probably white kids, or hypothetically it might be depending where you're at. And so you kind of have that weird kind of combination of growing up in a diverse country, but maybe not necessarily in a diverse school or neighborhood, right? Like you could just be in an all white neighborhood, but be in a country that has like, a high percentage of people from other countries. And so it kind of creates bubbles a little bit. So like, how did you end up going to Europe then? Like you live in Germany now. Is that the first place in Europe that you went to, or did you have some other trips before that where you visited?
So I left South Texas when I was 18 years old, and I haven't lived there since. And I went on to university, which was about 6.5 hours away, Texas A&M University. Funny enough, the lack of diversity was like flipped. So like my university was predominantly white. I think like over 80%. So like I go from like, yeah, my predominantly like Hispanic community to like a predominantly white one. So like still not like ultra diverse, but different. And while I was there, I met some international students that really inspired me. It was the first time in my life that I had befriended people outside of my state. I only knew people from the state of Texas, like my whole life. And then suddenly I was just like, oh my gosh, like, you guys are like a wealth of information. Like, tell me more. Like, what is life like outside of here? And I was completely fascinated, and I applied for an internship in Poland. And I ended up then initially like spending a summer in Poland in 2015. And had an incredible time, met so many different people, kind of understood that the US was gouging us for our degrees. Like, it's just crazy expensive. I thought like the whole world takes out like wild student loans. I really thought like, you don't know how bad you have it. Like, or like, you don't know how shitty of a situation that you're in until people tell you otherwise.
Right.
I thought it was just like normal. I'm like, oh, like everyone has like stupid like amounts of student loans, right? That's normal. And then just like dawned on me there that I was like, oh, it's not. This is a US problem. So met some friends there. I had met a German friend, Julius, who the first German person I ever met, and he had told me like, oh, you complain a lot about how expensive it is in the US to study. Like, why don't you come study in Germany? And I was like, I don't speak German. And he said, you don't have to. Like, there's masters taught in English, and it's tuition free. And this was, at the time he told this to me in 2015, so 10 years ago, and it changed my life. So I applied for a master's program, ended up getting in, and like in 2016, I moved from Texas to Germany, and I thought like, okay, just 2 years, like, yeah, 2 years is not a long time. Like, even if I hate it, like, it's not that long. Like, I'll figure it out. I had never been to Germany in my life, like, not a single day. But everybody told me that, like, oh, Germany's very nice. Munich's very nice. So I was like, okay, like, why not? I was 21, didn't know a single soul here, but, like, had, like, all this drive and, like, excitement and curiosity that I was like, let's go. Like, why not? And, like, I'd be a fool not to, like, to do this master's for free. So that was 2016. And now it's been almost 9 years here. And needless to say that, like, I liked it so much that I stayed.
So did you actually end up going to Poland as well?
Visiting afterwards.
But like you said there was maybe an exchange or something with Poland? Yeah.
Yeah. So 2015, I had an internship there that summer.
Okay.
And that's like where I had met all these different people, and kind of it opened up my mind. It was like a summer of like enlightenment. Definitely.
That's where you met the German guy that told you should study in Germany and
exactly.
for free. Yes. So you went from like never leaving your home state of Texas to doing an exchange program in Poland to moving full time to Germany.
Yeah, exactly. I had never lived anywhere else. I mean, I had been to a few states. I had been to like Paris once and Costa Rica once, but like for university kind of trips that were like 1 week. So like nothing like extensive, but I had never ever lived in another place other than my home state.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to go abroad and to travel, right? A lot of motivations. And I think that people love to talk about the education in Germany. It's free, like, why wouldn't I go there? It's so much cheaper than where I'm coming from, especially if you're coming from North America, where, like you said, people take out huge student loans to do their degrees and things like that. So like that was your initial motivation. But what has kept you there for so long now? Like 9 years, it's not just about the free tuition anymore, right?
Yeah. I do have to make a disclaimer that unfortunately my university 2 years ago, I think, now charge like tuition for international students. So I was I was privileged to like
you were the last one.
I was like one of the last, like, but that's a whole other story. What has kept me here? The quality of life, honestly. I can't get enough of it. I shuddered like at the thought of like having to go back to the US and like having 10 days of vacation a year. I started working here as a student in my master's program, and even as a student, they gave me vacation days, and I was just like, huh? Like, I'm working part-time. Like, what? I get paid vacation days? Like, you're not treating me like a peasant? Like, what's going on here? The quality of life, honestly, like the walkability is amazing. Public transport, amazing. Like, I didn't have a car here for the first, I think, 6 years. Didn't need one. Still don't need one today. Munich is just such a beautiful city. There's so much nature. There's proximity to the German Alps, which is about an hour and a half away. So one can like go on epic hikes. Like there's so many alpine lakes. Like there's a river running through this city. And I think honestly, healthcare is a huge thing, and safety. There's a whole list up here of like reasons like why I stayed. Healthcare. I mean, the system itself, like I'm a big fan of. As an American, like looking at German healthcare, I can only like give it a round of applause. I know a lot of Germans like have a lot to say about it. And I also like commend them on that, because the Germans have very high standards for themselves. And I think that's really cool. I've once told them like, oh my gosh, your system's great. And they're like, oh, no, it's not. And I said, yeah, like compared to the US. And they were like, oh, like don't compare us with to the US. Like compare us to the Nordic countries. And I was like, oh, okay. Fair, fair. Yeah. Maybe my standards are like on the ground, like very, very low. I think the fact that I've like just like knowing that if I like, I mean, like God forbid, if I were to like be diagnosed with like something tomorrow, something serious like cancer or whatever, that I wouldn't need to go bankrupt in this country to get the care, and like that helps me sleep at night. And I'm someone that like I very much value my health, and I do not take that for granted. I think a lot of people in the US are just like, oh, but I'm like healthy and I always will be. But I'm just like like literally anything could happen to us. I'm not a hypochondriac by any means. Like I'm not like scared of getting sick, but I'm just like having healthcare is good.
Well, it doesn't even have to be an illness though, right? You could have an accident and something could happen, right? And that's something that stresses me out too when I'm in the US. Like I was there last summer for a friend's wedding in California, and we're driving around, and I also didn't get travel insurance, which I probably should have, but I was thinking like, if we get in a car accident right now and I break my arm, I mean, I don't have $200,000 or whatever it's going to be. I don't have any insurance in this country. Like I'm going to be totally screwed. Like that's a scary thought to have.
Oh, yeah.
If you were living in that reality every day, like I understand that a lot of Americans also have insurance like through their job or something like that. Or like you have private insurance as well, right? Like through the state.
Yes, exactly. Right? Private is very common in the US.
But like even with that, it can be very, very costly to have just like relatively minor surgeries and things like that. And that would stress me out to live in that all the time. Like I can't imagine that just looming over your head. Like, oh, gee, I hope nothing happens to me so I don't have to mortgage my house.
Yeah, no, seriously.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is insane. And I think like it really, really dawned on me like the first time that I was visiting Texas for the first time, because I no longer lived there, and I was looking at travel insurance because I was like, I no longer have health insurance in the US, and I'm terrified of like having a freak accident and then like being in medical debt, like to some private hospital, like just like that's just like a nightmare scenario for me. And I hope that never happens. Therefore, I have travel insurance and I renew it every single year.
That's smart. That's the better way to do it than what I do. So like you went to Germany. It was a 2-year master's program. Is that right? And
exactly.
Then from then on, you've been essentially a full-time resident of Germany. You haven't lived anywhere else since then.
No, actually, I have stayed even in the same city here, like in Munich. Munich,
Okay.
Germany, the home of Oktoberfest.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've heard it's like a little bit more traditional in the south, right?
They say that like Munich is, or like Bavaria, Bayern, it's called Bayern in German, that it's like the Texas of Germany.
Really? Okay. Just
Yes.
because it's in the south or
Because like conservatism and like leather pants and meat and potatoes, like
okay.
these are all hand in hand. I identify with like none of those things. I'm like a vegan, very, very liberal from
Hmm.
Texas, so like quite the opposite of like a stereotypical Texan.
Right.
Nevertheless, yeah, but Bavaria is an epic state.
I mean, I'm from Alberta, which people say
Oh
Alberta is
yeah,
the
it's like the
Texas of
Texas.
Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that is somebody's Instagram bio right now. Conservatism, leather pants, meat and potatoes.
Oh
I
yeah. Those are like the best taglines for them, yeah.
I
It would
guarantee
make a
it.
good country song.
Yeah, true. Get AI to write one of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the longest that you've been back in the States since you moved to Germany?
That's a good question. Yeah, it was 6 weeks. And I was gone. It was following the longest time that I hadn't been back. So I typically would try to go back once a year. I mean, at first I was a student on a student budget, so that was sometimes hard. But I somehow made it happen. I'd go back once a year, and then during the pandemic, there was, I think, a point where I didn't go back for 2 years. And I mean, 1 year always felt like long, like long enough. Like so, 2 years felt like just ages. And after I was gone for 2 years, I think it was then in 2022, I went back for 6 weeks in Texas, and that was actually a point that I was like, I've been in Germany now like 5 years or so. Like maybe it's time to move back. And I was like looking at Texas like with different eyes and everything. And I somehow like came back to Germany and like stuck it out, and now I want to stay here.
So, like, when you were back for those 6 weeks, you were kind of getting tired of being in Europe and were thinking about going back? Or
Yeah,
was it just like, yeah, okay. Hmm.
exactly. At the time, I even like I wanted to like just have a new adventure. I thought maybe like I'll move to Singapore, or I didn't have a partner. Like I hadn't met my partner Tim yet. So I was just like, oh, like what's the next adventure? Like maybe I in another life, like I'm living in Austin, working at a tech company with like a kayak and a Subaru. I was just like romanticizing like what could life be in Texas? But honestly, like a lot of like one of the biggest reasons why I've also stayed here that I didn't really touch on is safety. Safety is like a huge thing for me. It's a priority, and here in Munich, Germany, I feel incredibly safe versus like a city like Austin, Texas, or any major city in Texas for that sake. And that's something that I'm so grateful for, especially like as a woman. And that's something that I value because I didn't have that actually. I wasn't stressed growing up. It was just like business as usual, normal life. Well, like I said, if you don't know how bad you have it, or like you don't know like that the situation is like not the best, but like it's just your normal. Like so you're not like stressing. But when I came to Germany and suddenly like I felt, I mean, there was like a transition period of 2 years that I was like, I'm not sure about walking at night alone as a woman, because I just like couldn't believe that that was okay. And then eventually like I kind of like let my guard down and was like, okay, like girl, you are safe. Like you're safe here. It's okay to walk as a woman alone at night. Um that like changed everything. I mean, I can't speak for all cities in Germany. Like I live here in Munich, which is just known to be very, very safe. But that to me was like invaluable. And now when I go back to Texas, I look at it with different eyes and I'm like, oh, it sucks. Like how you have to drive everywhere. I can't simply like go walk to the grocery store, and let alone at night. God, if you're like walking alone as a woman at night in Texas, like it's not the best at all. You'd have to watch out. But things are also just so far. So like one wouldn't. It's just a very, very different life. So I think a big reason why I continue to choose to like live here is safety.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make about not knowing the culture that you're in until you leave it. Like you just
Yeah,
don't recognize what's different about your home country or your home state or city until you have something to compare it to, right? It's
absolutely.
it's like the fish doesn't see the water, right? They just
Yeah.
live in it. And I can definitely relate to that. I grew up in a very small town, in Alberta in Western Canada. And so, I had a very specific kind of mindset and worldview that I grew up in. And then when I found out that there were things outside of what I was used to, immediately I was like, well, I got to go see that then, right? Like, why wouldn't I want to go and go on a trip and see something else? There's a place where there isn't winter for 8 months of the year. Are you kidding me?
Oh, man.
Let's book a flight. What are we doing here? Let's go. Yeah. And so I do think that you either get very comfortable in an environment where you grow up, or you have that kind of switch in your brain that says you need to go and try something new.
Yeah.
Like explore something and see something else. But moving abroad, like, it's also not all like easy. There are challenges that come with that. There are never just like the thing that you might be looking for, whether it's free tuition or, shorter winters or whatever. Like, a country obviously has much more than that. And sometimes that can be challenging. Were there like culture shocks for you when you first moved to Germany?
So for you, like you said, you're just like, wow, there are places that like don't have winter. For me, I was just like, what? Like, winter? What is that? Because I grew up like where I always say there's 2 seasons in South Texas, hot and hotter. Like, that was it. I didn't own a coat in my life. And I moved, I moved in August 2016. So I remember like my first month there, like it was blazing hot for me. I wasn't used to life without air conditioning. That was a cultural difference. I had like lived my entire life like with AC blasting. Like, if you know anything about the US, maybe then it's like it could be like blazing outside and like you go inside and it's like a freezer. Doesn't make much sense. It did to me when I lived in the US. But so like I just remember like it just being blazing hot. Cultural differences, just like in general, being able to like be so free without a car was wild. I had sold my car in Texas and suddenly, like, and I didn't feel limited by any means. So like that was just incredibly freeing. I was just like, what? Like, I don't have to drive anymore. Like, amazing. That was very cool. The grocery stores were very, very stressful. Like, my first week, like the Germans are like so serious, like all business. Like, there are no baggers. Like, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in Texas, like we have like often it's like sometimes people's first job like is like a grocery bagger. They don't have baggers here in Germany, and like you're expected, I learned like the hard way, you're expected to like pack your groceries as they are being scanned. I thought that would be like rude. Like, I haven't paid for this yet. Like, why should I be like looking like I'm gonna take off? But like, oh my gosh, everyone's so mad about me not packing my bags. Like, I think like just like the old people in Munich in particular, like, were not friendly at all. Like, I got yelled at, I think, like my first week in Germany, and I was just like, that's odd. Like, the older people in Texas like mind their own business kind of, and like, I don't know, are just like kind of carefree. Like, they've probably had to like I don't know, be in people's business for years of their life, so like why would they have to now at that point? But in Munich, like, they always have something to say. Like, I was yelled at like my first week for crossing an empty street, like but the pedestrian like light was red. And like I'm suddenly like being yelled at in German by this little old man, and I was just like, I'm so confused. Just little things like that. And I think the biggest cultural difference was just like in the people. That here, I cannot speak for all of Germany, very particularly in Munich, the people aren't necessarily so friendly. And I stand by that. 8.5 years later, I can solidly say that the people here like aren't super warm and open and friendly. And I can note that when you asked me also like what has kept you here, I didn't immediately say like the people, the people and their warm culture, because like that's just like not it. And that's something I deeply miss from my state, honestly, is like Southern hospitality and like strangers being friendly like to one another. That's just a big cultural difference, honestly. The people, like Germany, like Munich, Germany versus Texas, like just two different worlds. And oftentimes Germans have told me like, oh, but everyone in the US, like, you guys are just like fake nice. You guys are so fake friendly. Like, you're asking like, how's your day? And you don't actually care. And I'm like, but things don't have to be that deep. Right. Like it's surface friendly is still friendly for us. Like, and I find that like we're just like a bit misunderstood. And I've also told some German people, you know what, like maybe you haven't experienced like friendliness from a stranger. Maybe that's why you think we're being fake, like because you're just like not used to strangers being like super outwardly like friendly. But yeah, I would say that's like the biggest cultural difference that like, or the culture shock that I had and that I still have to this day, like 8.5 years later.
Like, I think that was one of the things that stood out to me when I went to Germany as well. I had, I mean, I'm aware that people do things differently in different countries, but I thought if I'm going to Germany, I mean, it's another Western country. My family is all like historically German. My last name is Hartmann. I'm like, come on, this is good. It's going to be easy. And then I got there and I was like, oh, wow, people do not act like Canadians act. They don't interact with each other in the same way at all. I thought the two cultures would be more similar than they are. And it became very clear to me that like people didn't care about me. Like if they didn't know me, they could care less about what I'm doing or what I need or what I want. They were just like, you do you, I do me, and this is how this world works. And so that was a shock to me, kind of a splash of cold water where I was like, oh, I got to figure this out on my own. And I also don't know how it works here. So this is going to be extra hard. But like Germans do, their rebuttal to that, from what I've heard, is like, they're like that with strangers, but when you make a friend, they're not like that. Do you agree with that?
They always say that. I would agree that like Germans, they say like, oh, it's really hard to like crack us, but once you do, then like we're your friend forever.
Yes.
I mean, yes, true. But still, I find that like my Texas friends and like friends made here in Germany, or the German friends here, it's still a bit different. I mean, I have an incredible like German friend who is my flatmate, but she's the exception. But like it's harder to make very deep, close friendships. Like, I don't know, my friends in Texas are the kind of people that like, I don't know, if I were to have an emergency at 3 a.m., like they'd somehow find me and like come and help me like in the middle of the night or whatever. Like the kind of people that would like give their shirt off their back. And like I'm not so sure like those friendships like are like that deep with the Germans. Maybe they are though, and maybe I haven't found that person yet.
I mean, it's a sliding scale, right, between being kind of like a collectivist society and being a little bit more individualistic. And you know, talking about not seeing your own culture, I also didn't realize how individual we were in North America until I went to countries where they're more on the opposite side of the spectrum, where they're more collectivist. You know, places like when I was living in Colombia and when I went to the Philippines, and those are countries where people depend on each other even more than they do here. And then I started to realize like how independent we are. And I think maybe Canada's a little bit more on that side than the US perhaps, but there are things in Canada that you just don't ask for as well, right? Where in other countries it's normal. Like in Colombia, you just show up at someone's house and you can just stay there. There's no questions asked.
Yeah.
Like, you just show up and like, yeah, if you want to stay here, you can stay here. And if more people come, we'll make room. People can sleep on the floor, sleep on the couch. It doesn't even matter. In Canada, it's like, you got to really call ahead. You got to make sure that they're not busy, that they have time off work, that they have a place for you. And sorry, my house is too small. You can't stay here. Let me find you like an Airbnb or something. Like, we're kind of like at an arm's length away all the time. And then in Germany, of course, they take that to the more extreme level, right? So maybe there are things that Germans would do for you, but it's not like culturally appropriate to ask them to do that. Like maybe calling at 3 a.m. Is something that they're just like, no, you just don't do that. You figure it out on your own because other people have their own lives or something.
They'd probably be like, you're a big girl. Like, you got this. Very pragmatic. They'd be like, no, like I didn't answer because I knew you could figure it out.
Yeah. And that's been a culture shock for me as well. Like with my fiance who's from Colombia, like when we're with her family in Colombia, they'll be like, oh, we're going to go to this store at the mall. So it's like, okay, great. Sounds good. And they're like, no, we're all going to this store. It's a collectivist. And in the culture that I grew up in, it's like, if you want to do that, you go and do that. But I might have something else planned for today, right? But they don't think like that necessarily. It's like, well, if we're going to do something, why wouldn't we do it together, right? And there's something really beautiful about that, but there's also some culture shock that can come from it. And now I'm talking about it from the other extreme, right? Not coming from the US to Germany, but from Canada to Colombia. So it's a little bit different. But does it feel isolating then to be living in that culture full time in Germany, or have you gotten used to it?
That's a great question. Definitely can definitely feel a bit isolating. One thing I will say that I'm very fortunate of is that I grew up deep into the Tex-Mex culture, which is different from like stereotypical like Anglo white American culture in a way of the, at least like stereotypes, if we're just talking like on a very, I don't know, in like a general surface level generalizations. But that the Tex-Mex community like really, really, really stick together. And I grew up in a small town of 40,000 people. Shout out Weslaco, Texas, where we all like, it was very, very tight knit. Everyone knew everyone, and we were all there for one another. I was just like remembering a few weeks ago that like my brother had a nerve injury and needed to go to Massachusetts for like a very extensive rehab, and my mom and her friends hosted like a barbecue, like a community barbecue, and sold barbecue plates. So that they could finance my brother going to rehab, like things like that, like that just show the power of community and things that I just kind of took for granted. And oftentimes I really feel a bit disconnected. Like I don't have that sense of like strong community here. I mean, I have luckily like a community in my incredible international friends. I'm so grateful that I have a lot of friends, but like deep, like being like intertwined deeply within the community is like not, or like my neighborhood, for example, it's like not there. And something that I deeply miss. And in a way, like when I compare like my life here to like my friends' lives back home in Texas, it does feel a bit like isolated and a bit of a selfish life. I don't feel bad about it, but like in the sense that like sometimes like my friends are like they're able to go help their parents like with, I don't know, something in their house and like go to Sunday night dinners and things like that. And I don't have that. I have my partner, Tim, and we live together, which is beautiful. But both don't have family here in Munich. So we're kind of just like doing things for fun all the time, helping our friends and like being there for our friends. But when it comes to community, it hasn't been that deep yet. But I will say maybe I haven't been the best villager, because they say like, to create a village, like you have to be a good village member. So maybe I need to like be more active, and like there's an app in Germany called Nebenan. In the US it's called Nextdoor, where you can like, it's like a little Facebook for your neighborhood. And like my neighborhoods pop in on there. So like maybe I need to join and like be a good village member.
Yeah, like I don't know how it is for you after being in Germany for so long. Like I think the longer you're in a place, the more you kind of get used to it. But I had a real mentality when I was in Colombia that the more different things were, the more resistance I had to accepting them. Like I got kind of like, I think that my cup got too full, basically, where I was like, I can't take on any more new stuff.
I've already taken on X amount of things. Like
I'm already, like operating in a language that isn't my own and trying to get onto a different culture. And so then when there were other things that came up, sometimes I was like, you know what? I can't do it. You know what I mean? I just can't do it. And so then sometimes I would create problems for myself where I'd be like hanging out with people and I'm like, my Spanish brain is dead for today, so I'm not really going to be engaging with people. And then after I might say like, oh, wow, nobody talked to me at that party. And it's like, well, I was also not in the mood to talk to anybody, And so you get a little bit overwhelmed, I think, in a new culture. And sometimes that can create problems in and of itself. But I mean, for you, I'm sure that you've worked through that in a different way being there for so long, right? We're comparing literally 9 months to 9 years. But yeah, can you relate to that though?
Absolutely. Oh no, still even 9 years later. So like I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, I went to my boyfriend's family. It was called Familienfest, which is family festival. It's like a reunion in the north of Germany. And luckily it was like a week before one of my major exams, like a German exam that I was going to take. So I was like, oh, this is perfect, like perfect opportunity, like a final practice. And I was speaking German all day, like at his family festival reunion, I probably spoke to like over, I don't know, 10 people and over 10 hours. And at the end of the day, I was like with him finally just alone, and he was like, "How was it?" And I was like, "I'm exhausted," and I started crying. I like broke down, and when I've told people this story, they're like, "Oh, like were they mean? Like what did his family tell you?" And I was like, no, like everyone was so nice. I was just exhausted. Like it just felt like my brain was squeezed, like juiced. And I told him like I was like, he was like, "No, but you did good. Like you were speaking all day." Like, and I was just like, but like it hurts. Like, but it hurts. And I'm still waiting for the moment like that German doesn't hurt like that. I know it'll come with time. So like I was like capable, but not like wildly like comfortable. So I totally feel you of like yeah, it's hard, right? Like trying to express yourself and like also, yeah, just knowing that like, of course, in your native language, like you're funnier and you're cooler and you're like, I'm more extroverted. Like
smarter.
You guys, yeah, I'm all these great things in my native language, like compared to, yeah, the foreign language. So that's hard, right? Like trying to feel like understood and yeah, constantly maybe feeling misunderstood. Like also I start to think of a gym experience that like several years ago, like when I had been in Germany for maybe 3 years, I had joined a cool like functional training gym that just had like 10 people per class. So it was like a little like intimate, and like all the classes were in German, and I was like dead silent, like a little mouse there in the corner, like just trying to like learn all these new words. And they'd be like, "Do you have any questions, Paulina?" I was like, "Nine." Like no, I'm good. And like looking back now, like several years later, all I think about is like how sad is it that probably everyone in those classes, those gym classes that I went to for like 2 years, they probably thought like, "Oh, there's Paulina, like the quiet one, the shy one, the one who's just like timid or whatever." And I'm like, I'm not shy. I'm not, like that's not who I actually am. Y'all just saw like the other side, and like I think that's a constant struggle, right? Like in a foreign language is like trying to feel understood.
Yeah, try to be yourself as well. Like
Yeah.
when you learn another language, people always talk about how you can have a different personality, and that's true once you reach a certain level, right? When you're more kind of an upper level where you can reveal parts of your personality that maybe don't exist in your native language. But the opposite of that people don't talk about is when you haven't reached that level yet, you're actually losing a part of your personality instead of gaining it.
True.
And I remember when I was in Colombia, I would like my fiance's family, they don't speak English, right? And so we always speak Spanish with each other. And I remember we went on this family vacation, and partway through the trip, my fiance had some friends from the US that came to visit us. And so I was speaking English with them, obviously. And my fiance's brother, after like a couple of days, was like, "You speak really fast in English." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, I do. And you speak really fast in Spanish. But like when I'm speaking Spanish, I just can't, I can't keep up like that. I mean, it's not my language, right?" And so I try, but for the first time, he saw like more what I was like in my first language. And I was like, yeah, it's different. It's definitely going to be different, And so that can be a challenge. But so what has your experience been like learning German then? Like, did you start that right away, or at what point did you start learning?
Yeah. So my first month living in Munich, it was, I guess, September 2016. I actually enrolled in like this pre-study course. It was 1 month before my master's program of a German intensive class. And I'd like to think that helped a little. But I started from absolutely like zero. I don't even think I jumped on Duolingo before moving to this country. So like the class was like brutal. I was just like, how am I going to learn this language? It's so hard. And then I continued to like, I think I repeated the class again, like an A1 class, during university. And then life got busy. That's the hard part about coming to Germany, like through a pathway of like higher education. Like, so I studied in English. I worked as a student in English. I got a full-time position in communications, in English. And then now I work also like in marketing communication at a different company in English. My friends are foreigners. Like when we all speak English, like my boyfriend speaks German, but we only speak English with each other. So it's been hard, but one thing that really helped me was like when I started working full time and like had money then to be paying for classes because classes are so expensive, of course. I started taking online classes with this platform called Lingota.
Okay.
A lot of YouTubers also promote it, but I can honestly say good things. I really can. And it was very flexible and very cool. So I would take classes. I actually took 200 classes.
Whoa.
Over 2 years, each an hour. And then I took like a B1 exam that I needed to apply for citizenship, and I passed. And then just trying to like use my German in everyday situations. I mean, it's not often though. Like, I mean, at the grocery store, I might say 2 or 3 words, but I'm at a point now in the language where like I can have conversations. Yeah, I can definitely have conversations. Though I think to like get at a point where that I could be like business fluent one day, I would definitely need to be putting myself in more uncomfortable situations, which is like an active choice that needs to be made by me, because like the natural world that I live in here is kind of like a fake Germany in a sense. I've told people where like if I want to be speaking German fluently, I need to be super uncomfortable, and I have to actually make a choice to place myself in these circles. And like I think that's different from like your experience in Colombia, where you were like at your fiance's family's house and like her parents don't speak English. You don't have an option. But like I live with my boyfriend. We speak English. Like I speak English at work and with my friends. So like to improve my language right now, like takes a very active, it's an active choice. It'd be a decision to be like, no, girl, today, like, you're going to go hang out with your German friends and you're not speaking English, even though they all speak English. So it's a bit more challenging in that way of like not being forced. I think it's better to be forced, like go through that uncomfortable phase and like get through it. Cause like having that choice, then like you always find excuses, right? You're just like, oh, but like I'm tired. Like, it's been a long day at work. Like I work full time, 40 hours a week. And I think my next journey in the language learning, for German language learning would be taking more classes or like volunteering in German. I love senior citizens. I think it'd be so cute to like go listen to them all day. I'd love to listen to like a lonely grandma in my neighborhood. Like I think I could just like sit there and like she'd have no idea that she'd be helping me with my language skills. But I'd just be there like for 2 hours. I think it's really cool that some foreigners come to Germany and they study the language for like 1 year as if it's their job. They literally study like religiously full time as if it's like their job, and then they come out like fluent. And I've always been envious in a very positive way of them, because I haven't had that privilege. And I do think it's a privilege to be able to like exclusively be learning a language in this economy. But I came as a student. I immediately started working after, and I've been working ever since full time. So it's always alongside that. And I think it'd be a dream one day to like maybe take a little sabbatical and like not have to work for a few months and be like exclusively learning the language.
And I think like what we were talking about earlier too, about the cultural differences in Germany when it comes to interacting with people you don't know, is also that like when you meet people on the street, you're not getting a lot of language practice. Or like you said, when you go to the grocery store, you speak 3 words, right?
Yeah.
And
because of the culture, because they're not having conversations with you.
Like you could make small talk in Canada at the grocery store, no problem.
True.
You know, hey, how's it going?
In Texas too.
Nice weather or whatever. You could get some mileage out of that. But
that does not happen in Munich.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, and I was in the opposite side of Germany. I was near Bremen in the north.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was the same there as well. Like you would go into the grocery store, and the first thing that would be said to you is the price of what you bought. And then the second thing would be, schönen Tag noch, have a good day or whatever. And then that was it. That was the entire interaction was essentially 2 words. And
that's enough. That's more than enough for them. Yeah. That's more than enough.
That's on a friendly day.
They don't need to know your life story.
So like if you want to practice with people in your day-to-day life, like your professional life and your personal life are already in English. If you wanted to practice outside of that, Germany doesn't necessarily provide that very easily, right? That would be much easier in Colombia. And also like talking about, the necessity to learn a language or not, I think that either way you do hit plateaus. Like like you hit a plateau where it's like, I can get by in this language now, and so I don't need to learn more. And like, because when you get more advanced, like I'm sure like with your German now, the only thing that you would need to really do is add more like vocabulary, right? Because there's always more vocabulary to learn in every language. And so it could be, like you said, business vocab or whatever else, you know, but you have like the grammar to support the new vocabulary. But I'm in the same boat with my Spanish, where I can get by in Spanish very easily, but I don't have all of the vocab. And so once I can communicate with people, I just stop learning. Like, if I can get my point across to somebody, why do I need to learn the more complicated or more precise word to describe it, right? I say like simpler sentences. And so even in a kind of immersion environment, you still hit plateaus in the same way, I think.
They say that like a sign of fluency is being understood. So there you go. You got to give credit where credit's due. Maybe you're not using the most like the fanciest word, or like sounding so like eloquent, but like you're being understood. And I think that's definitely the goal.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you can also overcomplicate it, where it's like, I need to speak perfectly and I need to have like a huge vocabulary, but that also gets in the way of actual learning, because you're never going to reach that perfectionist proficiency, right?
Oh, for sure. On that note, like, so you know how Spanish has like this very simple articles of like masculine and feminine, but in German they have neutral as well. Der, die, and das. And every single like word, like noun has one. And I remember like the sheer thought of like having to memorize all these articles when I first started learning German, like just kind of like deterred me completely. I was just like, how am I going to ever learn this language? And now like 8 years later, I just like guess. I mean, I've obviously learned a lot of them, but like there's a whole world of words out there. And like, I'm just like, I'm going to probably be getting articles wrong, like when I'm an old little lady here in Germany. So like, might as well just like keep guessing and like keep speaking, like not let it stop me from speaking.
And it's not just like in Spanish, there's the masculine, the feminine, and that changes the definite articles, the indefinite articles. And that's, you know, it's challenging in and of itself. But German, that system is also connected to the case system, right? So all of those, the three, der, die, das, also change depending on what the role is in the sentence. And so that's really just like the tip of the iceberg. And it represents like all of these grammatical functions below, where all the different endings and stuff. And German is very tough. You know, I commend you for doing that. That's a tough language. Everybody says that German is a difficult language. So
it is, yeah.
Would you say that's the hardest part of the language for an English speaker, is the cases?
Probably. I mean, vocabulary too, but probably, like conjugating verbs, like that's also complicated. But, you know, I always say that, like, like to just like people should just kind of ignore it and go for it. I'm not the best like at my grammar, but I'm still trying. Because I feel like if we like spend an eternity trying to memorize every single rule, like it's just going to inhibit you. Like if you're a perfectionist, and like I really try to like not have that perfectionist mindset when it comes to speaking. Easier said than done. Because I also like have internal self-deprecating thoughts of like, oh my gosh, everyone thinks that like I'm talking like a baby, like they're probably all laughing at me, I'm so embarrassing, and no one's thinking that, like nobody's thinking that, I'm sure. But no, in that moment, it feels that's exactly like the thoughts that are going through my head. But I always tell myself, like, try not to like get stuck on the grammar itself. If you're understood, that's going to be good enough at the moment. And there's always room for improvement. Just go for it.
Yeah, I think that we assume that other people are thinking the things that we're thinking about ourselves. But most of the time, that's not the case. Nobody really cares.
No. And someone told me once, like, do you think that about how people, like, of people who speak English non-natively? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, no. And they're like, well, then why do you think that about others, like judging you? And I was like, ooh, that's true. That's very true.
And I would imagine that it's a little bit different in Europe as well, where people tend to learn more languages in school and things like that. Like,
they do.
You can meet people in Canada. The majority of people in Canada only speak one language, right? And so sometimes they're unnecessarily critical of people because they don't know what's involved in learning another language. But if you've gone through that process, even partially, if you've taken some classes in school or whatever, you're going to have way more empathy for people and be like, yeah, like if you're not saying this perfectly, it just means that you're operating in a language that isn't your first one. And so like that's a commendable feat in and of itself,
Absolutely.
you know? And so
a sign of knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. You have double the languages as someone who only speaks one. And so it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. And so and I think, yeah, German is especially hard for that because there are so many grammar rules that you can get kind of caught up in. And I learned some German as well when I was in Germany and also outside of that here in Canada. And one of the kind of critiques that I got from one of my German friends is like, yeah, your grammar is very good, but you have to think about it so long that it slows the conversation down, or maybe you don't have the vocabulary to like talk about a bunch of different topics. So you can talk about, 3 out of 10 topics with really good grammar, but you're still missing the other 7, where someone that doesn't care about the cases can just speak more freely and more quickly, but then makes more grammar mistakes, right? So it's kind of like you have to hedge your bets and kind of go in the middle where you have some grammar and maybe some, fluency. And
on the topic of like of languages and like how Europeans like know multiple ones, I don't know if you've like read the news lately, like how they just chose a new pope. I was raised Catholic, but I'm not religious anymore. I still find it very fascinating, like following all the news. It just feels like, I don't know, it's felt like it was like a music festival, like seeing the crowds out there in Rome at the Vatican. I think like I saw like a TikTok the other day that like showed a conservative news outlet like really like bashing the new pope because his first speech was that didn't include English.
Yeah.
And they were mad about it. They had something to say. They had a bone to pick. They were like, he's from Chicago and he didn't even speak English. Meanwhile, this man spoke Italian, Spanish, and Latin.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
For the people because they are in Italy. I just found that so funny how like unfortunately, like a lot of people in the US still have this very, very outdated mindset when it comes to speaking other languages and like just like holding up that kind of elitism of like, oh, English is like the language, where there's just so many other languages out there that are beautiful and incredible ways to express oneself.
Well, and that's a monolingual problem as well.
Yes.
Right, like yeah. I worked at this one place. It was like a kind of like a factory, and there was a lot of Filipinos that I was working with, and so people would speak Filipino with each other. I would speak Filipino with them. Cool. But there were some people that would complain about that because they're working in the same environment and they can't understand what's being said. Now you can probably guess where those people were from.
Yeah.
They were like,
and how many languages that they spoke.
Exactly. They're like old school, like middle-aged white Canadians that are like, I don't understand what's being said. They're probably talking about me and my...
It's fear of the unknown, right? Exactly. Like they think like suddenly like their worst fears are just like coming alive in their head of like this, but they're probably talking trash, which is like, no, dude, like that is like the least of our problems. Like we are not talking about you.
They take it so personally. They're like, if you're speaking another language, you must be talking about me. Or if the Pope isn't speaking English, it must be to exclude me. It's always about like this self kind of focused worldview that doesn't make a lot of sense. And my manager at that job made a really good observation that the only people that had trouble with others speaking different languages were the ones that only spoke one language. And so it's interesting how that works. You know, when you speak other languages, you understand how that works. When you speak one, you kind of miss the point, I think. Hey, Paulina, this has been really fun. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Before we wrap up, tell people how they can find you online. You have a new podcast, the Pod Abroad. Tell people how they can find that.
Yeah, so I am on YouTube. It's called The Pod Abroad. I am also anywhere where you find podcasts. So whether that's like Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify has a video version. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram for little clips, if that's your thing. And yeah, it'd be great if you guys gave The Pod Abroad a listen. And thank you so much for having me, Jared. It's been a lot of fun and really cool conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.